Welcome to Think Like a Pancreas The Podcast, where our goal is to keep you informed, inspired, and a little entertained on all things diabetes. The information contained in this program is based on the experience and opinions of the Integrated Diabetes Services clinical team. Please discuss any changes to your treatment plan with your personal healthcare provider before implementing. So welcome everybody to today's podcast. I'm Gary Scheiner, and I am thrilled to be joined by my friend and colleague, Rabbi Hirsch Meisels. Rabbi, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Gary. We've seen each other many times, and thanks for getting me on this show. So, shalom. My name is Rabbi Hirsch Meisels. I've been living with type 1 diabetes for the past 46 years. Currently, I use a tandem basal IQ insulin pump alongside with a Dexcom G6 sensor to help manage my diabetes. I'm the founder of Friends with Diabetes, an organization established 30 years ago with the mission of helping individuals integrate a Jewish lifestyle while managing type 1 diabetes. Our goal is to provide guidance on how Jewish law, called halacha, relates to managing diabetes and offer social and emotional support to those living with the condition and their families. We run support groups for children, teens, parents, and adults, helping them navigate life with diabetes while maintaining a strong connection to their faith and community.
I've had the pleasure of participating in almost a dozen of your programs over the years. I find them soulful. I find them rejuvenative and a tremendous learning opportunity. I always make new friends, so the name Friends with Diabetes is a very appropriate one. Those are tremendous programs for the Jewish community. And like you, I've been through my share of Passovers with diabetes. I'm coming up on 40 years. I haven't quite caught you, but I'm still trying. Coming up on 40 years with type 1 and 40 years of Passovers through the mix. So the title of our program today is Powering Through Passover. But it's interesting. A lot of people find Passover challenging when you have diabetes. I find that my glucose control improves for the 8 days. I find I'm more on track with my diet because this stuff I normally nosh on, I'm not noshing on. The restaurants I might normally go to, I'm not going to. I do a better job with my eating during those 8 days, and hence I've got better glucose control during that time. What have you found to be the case for you? Is your blood sugar better, worse, or about the same during Passover?
Sometimes on the first few days, I'll struggle with some low blood sugars until I get used to this new regimen. But yes, you're correct. With less food choices around, blood sugar control is much easier.
So, the lows, there's a lot to work out those first couple of days. There's a lot of details and new responsibilities, and that mental energy can contribute to a bit of a glucose decline. So for our non-Jewish listeners, and we have quite a few, can you tell us just a quick summary of what Passover is all about?
Let's try. Passover, or Pesach, is one of the most significant holidays in the Jewish calendar, celebrating the liberation of the Jewish people from slavery in ancient Egypt. The holiday spans 8 days, with the first 2 nights centered around the Seder, a special meal that includes symbolic foods, prayers, and storytelling. The Seder is an opportunity for families to retell the story of the Exodus using the Haggadah to guide them. The children traditionally ask the 4 questions, which help engage everyone in understanding the holiday's meaning. The symbolic foods on the Seder plate include matzah, an unleavened bread, represents the bread the Jewish people ate in their haste to leave Egypt. Maror, bitter herbs, usually horseradish, symbolizes the bitterness of slavery. And wine, 4 cups are drunk during the Seder to symbolize freedom and redemption. During Passover, Jewish people refrain from eating chametz, leavened foods like bread and pasta, for 8 days, in remembrance of the unleavened bread they ate during the Exodus. Some individuals, particularly among Ashkenazi Jews, also avoid legumes, called kitniot, during this time. These dietary restrictions can make finding suitable ready-made foods challenging, So it's important to choose products that are specifically certified as kosher for Passover.
Do you have any traditions outside of the normal, reading of the Haggadah? I know we hide the afikomen. The afikomen is a half piece of matzah that you wrap, and someone in the family hides it, and one of the children is supposed to find it, and they get a prize if they're able to. So we always have fun with that, but we send the adults scouring the house as well. We find some creative places to hide the afikomen, so that's kind of a fun activity. You do anything like that at your Seder?
Yes, it's part of the Seder ritual. By us, we don't really hide it. On the couch we sit on, there are two pillows, and we just put them between the two pillows. The kids try to take it away when father is not seeing, and then when the time comes to eat it, which is the last food eaten during the night, the father looks for the afikomen, can't find it, and asks who stole the afikomen, and then they would come back and try to argue, if you promise me to do this or get me this, I'll give it back to you. So it's sort of permitted stealing.
Yeah, our other family tradition is one of the post-meal songs, Chad Gadya. We all take on the role of one of the characters. And my mother-in-law,
who's the
rest
stick?
her soul, she used to be the ox, and she would make the sound of an ox that would frighten frighten anybody who could hear it. And we would all come up with these creative voices to animate the different characters in the song. So it was always a fun ritual that our family likes to do. So the Seders usually take place the first 2 nights of Passover. And there's a lot about the Seder that's different from a normal evening meal. What do you find are some of the bigger differences between a Passover Seder and a normal meal?
Starts much later at night, way after sundown, and it ends usually not before midnight or many hours later. So very different schedule. And then having to recite all the Haggadah, and many families with many translations and commentaries and stories. This takes a long time even before we start the actual meal. Could take between 1 to 2 hours until we get to the actual meal, which would be very late at night.
So for somebody with diabetes who takes insulin specifically, that can create some challenges. People who are on injections might start to see their glucose decline while they're waiting to eat late into the evening. And even just that long drawn out aspect of the meal can be problematic. Somebody who takes injections might find that their insulin is working before they have a chance to finish their meal and could go low from that. Insulin pumps offer us some opportunities to manage a little bit better. How do you use your insulin pump to manage your glucose with that kind of a meal?
So interestingly enough, as you mentioned, the Seder is different for every family. We always eat it with family. We have no clue how other families do it. Like you mentioned with the Chat Gadya, I've never heard this. So by us, interestingly enough, we have to finish the last piece of matzah for the afikomen, and then we can't eat anything afterwards. We have to finish that before midnight. And think about starting the whole Seder when it's already dark or later. The Haggadah would take 1 to 2 hours. There's not much time left for the actual meal. Traditionally in our family, it's an extremely rushed meal, shorter than a typical holiday or Shabbat. I never had that problem with prolonged eating in terms of the insulin. But if people do it the other way around and the meal is a dragged out meal, they'll have to handle this like with any other holiday extended meal. And each person's different.
Many families, the story of the Passover run through the Haggadah, and then the meal actually goes on for several hours. There's a lot of courses, etc. There might be some prayers said during the meal, some songs that are done during the meal and after. We used to save the dessert items until after all the post-dinner songs and prayers take place. So the meal part can sometimes go on for quite a while. And the pumps give us a chance to, dose our insulin as we go fairly easily. And there's a feature in most pumps called an extended bolus that can be used as well. The interesting thing about some of the newer systems that are out there, like the Tandem and the Omnipod 5 and the Medtronic, and even the open source systems, is some of them don't allow you to extend boluses while they're making automated adjustments. So you have to turn off the automated feature to extend the boluses for those drawn out meals. But I find it's still worth doing. The one food that is most closely associated with Passover, of course, is matzah. Tell everybody what matzah is.
Matzah is basically flour and water, nothing else. Pure starch, high glycemic index. If it's not whole wheat, if it's whole wheat, it's a bit better, or spelt. And eating matzah could potentially raise blood sugars to a very high level and very rapidly, very quickly, high speed. Many families have a custom not to mix the matzah with anything else. No spreads on it, no dips. So this takes away the advantage of having it mixed with a protein or a fat. So it stays a high glycemic index, and it is an issue.
Yeah. So if somebody is taking a bolus of insulin for matzah, they need to ideally take it in advance, because that matzah does raise the glucose very quickly. But you mentioned toppings and dips. Chopped liver, for example, would certainly slow down the digestion of the matzah a bit to keep it from spiking the glucose all at one time. So that's an option people can turn to. Other than matzah, well, let's talk about the matzah a little bit more. Now, the carb counting can be a little bit of a challenge, but you've come up with some techniques and tools that can help people estimate the carbs in matzah, as well as some other Pesach foods. Any tricks you can share about matzah carb counting?
People using machine matzahs, the square matzahs, they're pretty simple. They're usually not too heavy, would be about 1 ounce each, and you'll get somewhere between 20 and 25 carbs per matzah board. It's not overdone if you eat one whole matzah. That's usually simple. When it comes to the matzahs we use, the ultra-Orthodox, the round shmura matzahs, they can be very heavy, large, and discrepancies between one matzah and the other matzah in the same box. So there's no real choice but to weigh on a scale the portion you are consuming. What I've come up with is that matzah, roughly, I like averages, makes life simpler. It's roughly 70% carbohydrates. The other 30%, I guess, is the water or whatever else is in the wheat. 70% is carbohydrates. So the easy way would be put it on a scale, use a calculator to calculate the carb counts. Or in my mind, I have a simple way of doing it. I view it as 10-gram portions. Each 10-gram portion would be 7 carbs. 70% of 10 is 7. If I would eat a whole matzah, which would be 60 grams in weight, I'll view it in my mind as 6 such portions. Each portion having 7 carbs, 6 times 7, and you got the answer, 42. Roughly, if your matzah weighs 70, 70 of such portions, 7 times 7 would be 49. Sure. That's easily done in my brain.
If someone doesn't, have a food scale, I teach them how to use surface area, the volume, the kind of the radius, or the diameter of the matzah as a way to estimate. If someone had a round matzah that was the size of a hand with the fingers spread, about how much carb would you estimate that to be?
I would say it weighs 20, and then it's
14 grams.
Carbs. Okay. The challenge with the matzahs we use, which people make by hand, is that the thickness of each matzah could be different. It's the real best way would be using a scale. In particular, it's so high in starches, it's so high in carbs, and so rapid glycemic index. We want to try to be as accurate as possible.
Okay. We teach, I use pizza as an analogy with the matzah. See, you're right. If you're getting pizza, you could have thin crust, hand tossed, deep dish. It varies a lot. So we teach with pizza, a hand-sized piece is about 30. If it's an average thickness of crust, if it's thinner, it's 20. If it's thicker, it's 40. So as a general rule of thumb, a round matzah the size of a hand is going to average about 15. If it's a thicker type of a matzah, it might be 20. If it's a thinner, it might be 10. So if somebody just has to ballpark it, they don't have a scale available, that's one way they can do it. The scale will give you the more accurate measure, but you could estimate pretty closely, at least, if you use that 10, 15, 20 number for a hand-sized piece of matzah. Of course, we're talking about an average adult man's hand. You know, a woman or a child is going to have a smaller hand. You got a different number. So you got to have a man's hand on, handy to be able to do that properly. So with matzah, getting the carbs right or close is part of the challenge. The other is the timing. And as you said, it's a very high glycemic index food. It's going to raise the glucose very quickly. So pre-bolusing, taking insulin 10, 15, even 20 minutes ahead is ideal. Most other foods we eat on Pesach, most of the starches are potato-based. So we're not having many other types of starches other than potato. And potato, at least white potato, is also a very high glycemic index food. So we're looking at a lot of high GI foods. So pre-bolusing on Passover throughout the week is going to be necessary to avoid the big spikes and drops throughout the day. Is that safe to say?
Definitely safe to say. People who try to limit their starches, like low-carb dieters, etc., could do the same thing on Passover. We eat meat, chicken, fish. Many families do eat dairy, some don't. There's still enough protein options. Whichever way you use potatoes during the year, you could do the same on Pesach. Add some fat, eat it together with protein. Don't overeat. All the tips you use around the year could be used on Pesach as well.
I've discovered the joy of matzah with cream cheese. I find that very tasty. And if I slather on a decent amount of cream cheese, it does slow down the digestion a decent amount. I'm not encouraging everybody to load up on a ton of fat during Passover, but, like you said, chopped liver, dips, things like that, it can help a bit. Word from our sponsor. Byram Healthcare understands that managing diabetes isn't one size fits all. With a full range of CGMs, insulin pumps, and diabetes supplies from top brands, Byram makes it easy to get what you need, hassle-free, shipped right to your door. And Byram's team of experts helps navigate insurance so you can focus on living your best life. Ready for better diabetes care? Visit byramhealthcare.com/podcast or call 866-692-8024 and select option 3. And now back to our program. Wine is another important aspect of the Passover Seder. We're drinking multiple glasses of wine, or, the young people might drink grape juice. But let's talk about wine first, because wine can have more than one type of effect on glucose levels. It can raise it and it can lower it. Could you talk about that a little bit?
It's always the question to choose between wine or grape juice for the 4 cups during the Seder. It's always important to be mindful of blood sugar levels. Grape juice, on one hand, are high in carbohydrates and cause rapid spikes in blood sugars, especially when consumed in large quantities. For those managing diabetes, I often recommend to dilute the grape juice with water, or opt for a lower carb option like Kedem's light grape juice. Wine, on the other hand, can have a different effect, and as you mentioned, it's a double whammy, it's a double-edged sword. Alcohol can lower blood sugars by inhibiting the liver's release of glucose, especially when consumed before a meal on an empty stomach. For people with diabetes, it's crucial to manage this carefully.
Or in large quantities.
Sweet wines are also going to have the opposite effect, that you could have a rise in blood sugar levels and following a dip, I'll get into a low blood sugar. Dry wines typically have fewer carbs or none, but much more alcohol. Moderate wines like Chablis provide a better balance. Not too much alcohol and not too many carbs. That would be a good in between.
Yeah, I find with the dry wines, higher quality wines, we don't tend to see much of a glucose rise. There might be 1 or 2 grams of carbohydrate or sugar per glass, but the alcohol can accumulate. Somebody who has 4 glasses of wine has a decent amount of alcohol there. And if the liver isn't making as much glucose as usual after the Seder, blood sugars can drop overnight. People who use automated insulin delivery systems are somewhat protected against the lows, but if you want to play it safe, you can turn off the automation and then lower the basal insulin that you get during the night. You would run a temp basal and maybe lower the basal by 30 or 40% through the night, just to lower the risk of having a hypo. And people on injections could cut back a little bit on the dose of long-acting insulin, whether it's Tresiba, Toujeo, Lantus, Glargine, whatever they're using, Basaglar, taking that dose down a little bit just to protect against the low during the night. The sweet wines, though, will usually, it's like drinking grape juice with alcohol, essentially. They can cause a pretty rapid rise in the glucose. So I still recommend taking a bolus of insulin, of rapid acting insulin, to cover the carbs in those. 4 ounces of sweet wine or grape juice can have as much as 15 grams of rapid acting sugar in it. So it's necessary to dose for those.
Here's a recommendation I make. Prepare for the Seder both options, a dry wine and grape juice. The first cup, which starts the whole Seder, you still have probably close to 2 hours until you're going to eat the meal. With that long period of time, I say you have to judge before drinking the first cup if she uses grape juice or wine. If your blood sugar would be low at the start of the Seder, use grape juice for the first cup, so it'll help you raise your blood sugar. On the other hand, if your blood sugar is higher, using a dry wine may actually help lower it, possibly without the need of a correction dose.
It's interesting. That's the same approach I use when I do any distance running. I'll get to a rest stop and I'll choose between water or a sports drink, depending on what my blood sugar is doing. So it's diabetes. We got to make decisions on the fly a lot of the time based on the situation. The sitting is another issue. When we sit for long periods of time, our bodies are burning less glucose. We become a little less sensitive to our insulin and blood sugars can climb. So during a prolonged Seder, there may be a tendency for the glucose to climb throughout. Do you just not worry about that and let it happen? Or do you want to address it and keep it from happening?
Here's the way I address it. The Haggadah is like a long prayer. Many pieces in it could be made into a song, and just stand up and start dancing with the whole family. You do that once or twice in the middle of the Haggadah. You're not sitting that long. You're actually moving a little, get your body active, and that helps with that issue of losing the insulin sensitivity.
I love that approach. We should do that when we're on airplanes too, sitting all those hours. Just get up in the aisle and start dancing every hour. That works for me. Now, obviously, in the Jewish faith, we have people who are Orthodox, conservative, Reform, Reconstructionist. So there's different levels of observance that take place. Is there anything about having diabetes that should keep somebody from following any of the observances during Pesach?
Good question. As a general rule, Jewish law prioritizes health and well-being, allowing commandments or customs to be adjusted in life-threatening situations. However, adjustments can also be made for medical or health reasons, not just life-threatening circumstances. With that in mind, let's focus on relevant details. Jewish law is complex, and often there are different opinions on the same issue.
Interpretations, yeah.
Correct. This is where a competent rabbi who understands the medical situation comes into play, helping to determine which more lenient opinion one should follow. For example, In halacha, Jewish law, there are various opinions regarding the amount of wine or grape juice required for each of the 4 cups during the Seder. Most lenient opinions suggest that only 1.5 ounces per cup is necessary, while other opinions may require up to 5+ ounces per cup. For someone with diabetes, drinking 20+ ounces of wine or juice, if you want to follow the most stringent opinion, that could lead to significant blood sugar fluctuations. Therefore, it's important to follow the lenient opinion and aim for a smaller amount. This would allow you to fulfill the Seder's obligation while effectively managing your health. Same would be true for matzah. As we discussed, it's a pure starch, a high glycemic index, it can lead to blood sugar spikes. Different opinions exist regarding the required amount of matzah. Generally, it's recommended to eat around 30 grams at the beginning of the meal, with additional portions as the meal progresses. If that amount would lead to erratic blood sugars, you can reduce and consult with a rabbi for guidance on how to adjust based on personal health needs. I'll give one more example. Some families follow strict customs during Passover, permitting only homemade products with everything prepared from scratch at home. However, there are situations, such as managing diabetes, where exceptions are made. For example, using store-bought candy to treat low blood sugars during Pesach is necessary and practical exception, allowing the individuals to maintain their health while still honoring tradition.
That was actually the next thing I was going to ask you, was about hypoglycemia. What are some of the recommended products for treating hypos during Pesach?
Technically, we have kosher for Passover items, all over the grocery store, and there are candies and all kinds of junk that we can get. The typical Winkies or Fizzers, they are not available in the kosher for Passover form.
Yeah, those are called Smarties in the
interestingly enough, that we, Friends with Diabetes, recommend people, if they use year-round only one specific thing for loaves, like in the case of Winkies, just use it for Passover as well. Don't fiddle around, okay, I'll use chewing gums for Pesach. It would take much longer time to raise your blood sugars. Just do the same thing you've done all year round.
Grape juice is always an option as well.
At home, when we're at home, it's easy to have grape juice. When we're outside, we're going for a ride, it's a little difficult to carry along a box drink or bottle of grape juice. So we look for some pocket items, like the candies, to have them handy while going on a hike, etc.
It's a shame Manischewitz doesn't make juice boxes. That would be so convenient.
Yeah, there are juice boxes.
Stick the straw in.
Imagine taking a hike. There's enough you have to schlep along with you. Candies fit better in a pocket.
Yes, absolutely. So considering, Pesach is a fairly long holiday, 8 days. There are a lot of dietary restrictions involved. How important is it to manage blood sugar levels during Pesach? And there's a certain trade-off with anything. Should we just say, you know what, I'm just not going to worry about it, let the blood sugars do what they may? Or should we really still focus in and dig in and manage the glucose well, like we normally do? What do you think?
We've got to live life, and quality of life is very important. That's why we're here, to give them the easy tips on how to manage it easily, so you don't have to go out of your way that much to still control your blood sugars. Whatever is doable is doable. If it's not, it's not. As you mentioned, it happens to be that we have better blood sugar control during Pesach. For whatever reason, I speculate maybe there are chemicals in the food all year round that create a stress on the body. I don't know. But yes, we do have an easier time controlling blood sugars. But if one finds that it's impossible, don't lose sleep over it. You try your best. 2 nights are tricky, and the rest, just follow the regular diet and try your best. And as we discussed, the most important would probably be the matzah and the potatoes. Once you know how to handle those, you're in good shape.
It's refreshing to hear you say that. I often have to remind my patients that the reason we manage our diabetes is to have good quality life. If we have to start sacrificing the things that give us a quality life to manage the diabetes, we're missing the point. We got to live life first. We got to enjoy ourselves and do our best to manage it, but don't let it interfere with what's really important. Family, friends, religion, the things that are, really make life worth living. If somebody's interested in learning more about friends with diabetes, how can they do that?
Probably best would be to send me an email to be added to our email list. I think that's going to be fairly easy. You can go onto my website. It's very outdated, but there you'll find an email to be able to communicate, to connect. The website is friendswithdiabetes.org.
That's simple enough. Do you have any conferences coming up?
Not in the near future.
Okay, because I know you've had countless programs over the years, mostly in the Northeast and the greater New York area, but in other places as well. Some are for couples, some are for children, some are for adults, some are for men, some for women. And they're just it's a warm environment. People there have a lot of commonality, and you do make a lot of friends there, and you learn some valuable things, and all within the context of a Shabbos weekend. It's terrific events, and you have some excellent resources as well, specific things about the various holidays and managing diabetes. So just to summarize, Passover is it's an 8-day holiday. It's commemorating the exodus from Egypt by the Jewish people. To observe and recognize the holiday, there are certain dietary restrictions that are placed, number of ritual meals that occur, and they include some challenging things like matzah. There's a lot of potato products because we don't have bread or anything that contains yeast or can rise. Wine is a big part of the holiday. And there are tricks for managing diabetes effectively. We talked about estimating the carbs in matzah, as well as specific carb counting techniques, adjustments for alcohol, adjustments for changes in activity level, or making sure you still get some activity even during prolonged ritual meals. And
I think
the big point is enjoy it. Enjoy Pesach. That's what it's meant for. And if your diabetes isn't just so, that's okay. We do our best. That's all anyone can ask for. Anything important that I missed?
I think we missed one point regarding the Seder. I only say it because I've heard people, newbies especially, doing it the wrong way. From when we start the Seder night until we get to the meal could take a long time. Taking your insulin before the Seder begins would be a very bad choice. I mean, you would crash low even before the meal. To think about the insulin, the appropriate time would be right before drinking the second cup, which is followed by the meal. So there and then, before drinking the second cup, you can factor the insulin for the second cup, the matzah, the meal, and even the third cup. They could all can be included in that one bolus, regular or extended, right before the second cup.
Thank you for sharing that. I often tell my patients that getting the right amount of insulin is only half the battle. The timing has got to be right. So thank you for sharing that. And Rabbi, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join me today on the Think Like a Pancreas podcast. Thanks for tuning in to Think Like a Pancreas, the podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to like, follow, or subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Think Like a Pancreas, the podcast is brought to you by Integrated Diabetes Services, where experience meets expertise, passion meets compassion, and diabetes care is personal because we live it too. Our team of clinicians, all living with type 1 diabetes, understands the challenges firsthand. We're here to help no matter where you are in the world. From glucose management to self-care strategies, the latest tech, sports and exercise, weight loss, type 1 pregnancy, and emotional well-being, we've got you covered. We offer consultations in English and Spanish via phone, video chat, email, and text. Want to learn more? Visit integrateddiabetes.com or email info@integrateddiabetes.com to schedule a consultation. On behalf of Think Like a Pancreas, the podcast, I'm Gary Scheiner, wishing you a fantastic week ahead And don't forget to think like a pancreas.